So in this video, I'll show you how you can destroy objects and also then instantiate gifts and other things that will then jump out of these game objects. And of course, be able to pick up these objects as well. So let's get into it. So to achieve this effect of an object breaking apart, we'll basically need two objects. We'll need the whole object, so the crate in this case that is complete, and then we'll need a demolition version of it, so a broken apart version of the crate. So I've gone ahead and made those in a 3D program, so you can see here that I have crate whole and I have something called a demo crate. If I drag demo crate out into my scene, you'll be able to see that this object has a lot of sub-objects inside of it. And if we zoom on to the object itself, you can see here that it's actually just made up of a lot of these sides of the object itself. So what we actually want to do is when the crate whole that we have right here, which is then only one object, as soon as this gets hit by any other object at a certain force, we want it to change into this demolition crate with all of these different sides to it. So I've gone ahead and made a prefab of this demolition crate already, and I'll show you that prefab as well. I'll just drag that into the scene here. You can see it floats over here. So you can always zoom into an object by hitting F on your keyboard. As you can see here, the demolition crate and the demo crate 1 here look identical. The difference here is that I went ahead and selected all the individual objects inside of it and added a box collider and a rigid body. So if you want to do that yourself, also you can always select multiple objects like this and click add component. So anything you put in here like box collider and added will get added to all the individual sub-objects. The reason why we have both a box collider and a rigid body is so that when it falls apart and all of these get thrown out into the world here, it'll just break apart. So let me show you how that works. I'll also add a rigid body. I've added a normal rigid body to this as well. So this is the demo crate that we have currently changed this on. If I give this a bit of a rotation just so that we have a bit of angle, that'll hit it so it just doesn't fall flat down, and we play back, you can see that these different objects fall down. And as soon as they hit the ground, you can see that they break apart into these individual chunks. And this is the effect we want to achieve. As soon as we hit it with something in VR or in a game in general, it'll fall apart and basically be broken. So the procedure in creating one of these prefabs is just that. We will add a rigid body and a collider to all the sub-objects, and we can take the object itself and drag it right into our either project folder or anywhere in the project itself. When we let go, it'll ask us if we want to make a new prefab of it. Yes, we would like an original prefab. And now we have a object stored with all of those settings inside of it. Like I said, I've gone ahead and made that already, so I'll just delete the prefab I just created. I'll also delete the ones that I have added to the scene. So for this example, I'll just take these two boxes that I have already made here and I'll hide them so that we can make some new ones so that you can see the process here. First of all, what I'll do is I'll drag my crate whole into the scene. So I know the prefab that I have made for the demolition crate has been scaled by a factor of 3 just to make it a bit more visible inside of the editor here and also in VR. So I'll just scale this as well to be the same size. And it's of course important to have these objects the same size. If they are not, there will be a mismatch. So if I, for instance, were to hit this crate and it was at the small size, the chunks would suddenly appear a lot bigger than before. So I'll take this crate here and I'll move it into place on the table here. We'll just make one for the sake of this because we can always duplicate it. I want to make sure that there's not too much space below it, because if it falls at a certain speed, of course, also hitting the ground will then break the crate itself. So what we need to do first is we need to add a collider to this one here because it doesn't come with a collider. So I'll click add component and I will go for a box collider because it's a box. So now we have a box collider applied to the outer circumference of this object here. Now I want to make it into an interactable object. I showed you this in a previous video, so you can go ahead and look at that as well, but just the quick recap of it: go to Window, go to Tilia, go to Interactions, Interactable Creator, and this Interactable Creator, just make sure that your object is selected and convert to interactable. So now this object will be called Interactions Interactable Create Whole. As soon as I select it, you can see here that it has all of those scripts applied to them. So if you unfold it, you can see you have a mesh container and you have an internal. Internal is where all of the scripts and stuff are. The mesh container just contains the meshes, meaning that the cube in this case is from the demo object that you can find in the packages. So we would be able to just delete this one as well if you wanted to. The crate whole is just the crate as we know it. So it has just been moved into this mesh container. Overall, we just need to set up a few settings in the interactable object here. We need to go into the primary settings because we would also like to be able to take the object and actually throw it so that it would break. So to be able to grab it, let's set up these two actions. So the primary, we'll set that to be grab action follow. So when you click it and try to drag it around, it'll follow your controller, and the secondary action, just set that up to swap. So it'll swap to your other hand when you click it with the other controller. So now we need to set up a script for this interactable to be able to break. So go to the bottom of the stack here, click add component, and we'll call this breaker. So hit enter and hit enter again. It should create a new script and add that to the component as well. So you can double click the breaker script, and this script should of course open inside of Visual Studio. So here, to begin with, we need to set up a few public game objects so that we can get all the different objects that need to be instantiated, but also setting up something like breakVersion and getting the rigid body and stuff like that. Let's start by setting a total of 4 public game objects. So here, as you can see, I've set up a object to be replaced, a breakVersion, a meshContainer, which is going to be the meshContainer inside of the interactable, and then an object I just call gift, because if you want to instantiate another gift inside of the object when it breaks, like hitting the crate and then out pops a gift to the player, then you can do that as well. So now we also need to set up the breakVersion itself, meaning how much force do you want to be applied to the object or between 2 objects so that the object should break. So we'll set up a public float value. This float value we'll just call bForce, and we'll set it to 1 as a standard, and then because it's public, you'll be able to change it outside in the Unity editor. So we also would like to get the rigid body of the parent, so the overall object that contains all the interactables or all the meshes. So we can just make this a protected, and it's a rigid body, and we'll just call it RB for short, rigid body. So now I'd like to set up an integer to figure out if an object has been destroyed or not. Otherwise, it might start doing a constant collision check and also just constantly instantiating our breakable objects, which can kind of look cool, but it also will probably hurt your performance very extremely. So let's set up a private. We'll just make it an integer. You could also make it a bool. We'll just call it active. And we'll set it to 0 to begin with, and then we will change the state of that later. So in your start function here, you want to start out by getting the rigid body itself from the parent. So we'll just say rb equal to getComponent, and it's the rigid body component we would like, and close it off. So now comes the interesting part where we can actually figure out what we want to do when the object breaks, or when the object should break. So we'll set up a private function, so private void. We'll call the OnCollisionEnter. And it's just any collision basically, because we'll control this with an if statement. So anything that collides with the object should check this specific if statement. So if the rb.velocity, so the speed of the rigid body, its magnitude is larger than our bForce, and the state is currently set to active 0 because we haven't activated the breaking yet, then we wanted to do a couple of different things. First of all, we'll set it to be active ++, meaning it'll just add 1 to the integer, meaning it'll be set to 1 basically. So it'll change from 0 to 1. So in that case, you could also, of course, use a boolean to set it from false to true. First of all, we would like to destroy a certain game object, and that should be our original, the one that is actually the specific crate, so the whole crate that we want to destroy. So we'll set up the destroy function here, and we'll delete the object to be replaced, semicolon at the end. Then we want to instantiate our breakVersion. So instantiate, and inside of parentheses, we'll start by adding our breakVersion. The breakVersion itself needs to be instantiated in the same transform.position as the original or as the parent here. And of course, also the transform.rotation. So currently when we instantiate it, it'll just be there and nothing will really happen. If it's rotated a bit, that's fine. Then it'll kind of like just fall apart, but we would like it to look a bit cooler. So what we will be doing is we will be using a built-in function called addExplosionForce so that we can add a bit of like oomph to this destruction. So we'll say rb.AddExplosionForce. So this function takes a few parameters. The first parameter it takes is the explosion force itself. So in this case, we'll just set it to 10 and it's a float value. Next up is the position of the explosion. We could set it to one of the sides so that it'll start just flying in a specific direction, but we'll just set up a vector 3.0, meaning this will be at the very center of the object itself. And in this case, it's probably at the pivot point. And then the final part is what is the radius of the explosion, and we'll just set this to be 0 so that it won't affect any other aspects at all. Next up is if you want to set up a gift. So let's say when you hit the crate, it explodes and you want to have a gift pop up. We'll add that as well. So we'll say gift equal to, and then we'll go instantiate again here, parentheses, we want to instantiate the game object that's actually called gift, and it has the same settings as before. So in this case, it is gift, comma, and then transform.position and transform.rotation. And of course, we want it to be part of the new interactable object, or we want to put it inside of the meshContainer. Otherwise, it'll be instantiated out in the root, which probably won't work for this. We would like to pick it up and everything. And instead of having to set this up as a prefab, we can just make it a child of the meshContainer itself. So set gift.transform.position .setParent, and then the parent itself in parentheses is our mesh container that we have defined .transform. So in some cases, let's say you don't want a gift, for instance, you would probably want to destroy your interactable game object, because if it doesn't have a mesh inside of it, it'll just start falling through the ground and it'll fall forever. So in that case, you would probably need a destroy, and then you would just put in lowercase GameObject and then set a timer for that. Let's say 5 float, so 5 seconds, and this would destroy the overall main game object within 5 seconds after it has been hit with a breakForce. So I'll just comment this out, but at least you know now that you have the option. So I'll save this breaker script and we'll jump into Unity and do the setup. So here back in Unity, you can see that our script has compiled and we can see all of these different objects that it would like to get. So first of all, the object to be replaced is our crate hole that is inside of our interactable crate hole. So I'll drag this onto my object to be replaced. Then it wants the breakVersion. The breakVersion is just my prefab from my project over here. So I'll take demo crate and add that to the breakVersion. Now I will add the mesh container, which is this mesh container inside of the interactable object as a mesh container. And if you'd like a gift to spawn as well, in this case, I have just downloaded a few prefabs of some toys here that you can see. These are just from the asset store. And let's just say we'll want to spawn this rabbit here. So I'll get back in here, go to the bottom. So gift right here. I can take the rabbit, drag that in there. You can spawn any object that is prefab here. And then of course you have your destruction force or your break force right here that defines how much force you need to destroy this object. So let's try to jump into VR and see if this actually works. So here I am in VR. I can teleport around like before. I can also go to the crate here. I can grab it. I currently have it grabbed. I can throw it as well and it breaks and out comes the rabbit. And I can of course also pick that rabbit up and look at it, and I can also throw that because it's now my new interactable object. I can of course also go and grab other objects like the sword in this case here, which is just another interactable object that has a collider on it. And I can smack the crate here and you can see that it adds that explosion force and you can see the rabbit go flying. So that's basically it. And this is now how you create breakable objects inside of Unity using VR. This will of course also apply to any other type of objects that you want to break, but in this case we're using specifically VRTK4. So thank you for watching, everyone.